They were in love, it seems, but it was a chaotic, unstable love. They're not modern idiots anymore. I guess it's like vintage vibes now. Just because you can withstand the wind gusts of the cyclone doesn't mean you should stay in the cyclone. You can just be where there is a very cool and refreshing breeze instead. Your hair also won't get that messed up. That's the most important thing. She can't pacify his existence because the essence of his soul in this moment is to be tortured. And it says, everyone we know understands why it's meant to be. They know something that I don't. Hi everyone, and welcome to this video. Today we're going to be analyzing the title track of the Tortured Poets Department, which means the song title is also called the Tortured Poets Department. TTPD. TTPD. If you are new here, hi, welcome. This is an analysis channel. I analyze song lyrics very in depth through the lens of literary analysis. I usually start off my videos by analyzing the song title, but for this song specifically, I'm not going to do that. I just want to dive straight into verse 1 and we can talk about the song title as we move forth. As we run to the house where you still wait up and that porch light gleams. Are we doing that? Are we running there? Where are we running to? Verse 1. Verse 1 states, and I quote, "You left your typewriter at my apartment straight from the Tortured Poets Department." Okay, a little bit of lore. Let's talk about some things. And you guys, I normally don't talk about who I think songs are about, but please go watch my most recent videos. My perspective has shifted. Taylor Swift had a thing, a relationship, a fling, a romantic connection with Matty Healy from 1975 for about 3 months in the summer of 2023. Apparently, allegedly, Taylor and Matty Healy had vibes since the 1989 era. So by the time they got together publicly, they would have had a thing for about 9 years or so. From my perspective, and I think a lot of people agree, a lot of the songs in the Tortured Poets Department could potentially be about Taylor's relationship with Matty Healy. He does seem to be the muse for a lot of this new material we have, and I think this song specifically could be about Matty Healy. That is how I am interpreting it. There was a GQ interview with Matty that was resurfaced very dramatically, in which he talked about typewriters. In this interview in which Matty talked about typewriters, he said, quote, "It's not that there's any kind of like romance to having a notebook, but I really like typewriters as well. I don't have one with me because that's really impractical." It's a valid point. But the thing is, with typewriters and writing on pen to paper, there's kind of an element of like commitment that goes with the ceremony of it. Therefore, it requires you to concentrate a bit better. I wonder if Matty had any idea how important this quote would be years down the line. And listen, we don't know for sure what happened in that relationship between Taylor and Matty. I don't know these people. I don't know the vibes. We are extrapolating this out. These songs could not be 100% autobiographical. They could be inspired by true events, then fictionalized. That quote about typewriters from Matty is interesting because he talks about how typewriters have a connotation of commitment associated with it, and one could argue, based on the way the public has perceived Taylor's romance with Matty, as there being a lack of commitment, and the songs on the Tortured Poets Department suggest that the lack of commitment was on his part. The Tortured Poets Department album, in my opinion, suggests that he ghosted Taylor. That's quite an ironic thing to think about. So the mention of a typewriter here, in my opinion, does link this song to Matty. Let's review these lyrics again. So it says, "You left your typewriter at my apartment straight from the Tortured Poets Department. I think some things I never say, like who uses typewriters anyway? But you're in self-sabotage mode, throwing spikes down on the road." Let's stop there for a second. Listen, I like the 1975. I have listened to their music over the years. I haven't listened to all of their songs. I don't know the depth of the lore around them and around Matty the same way that I do about Taylor. I have seen some of your guys' comments where you're saying that Matty has written songs that could potentially be about Taylor Swift. I would need to dive deeper into that. I haven't had a chance to yet. However, based on how I perceive Matty Healy, which is very biased because I am a human being with biases, based on the interviews I've seen with him, based on his vibe, I do view him as an artsy person. I do view him as potentially being like a tortured artist sort of person. But I can see him as being a type of person that one could describe as a tortured poet or a tortured artist. I did describe the tortured artist trope in one of my videos analyzing the album, The Tortured Poets Department, before it's released. I'll link that down below if you're interested. But I could definitely see him fitting into that stereotype. So what's being said here by our protagonist could be literal. Maybe he did actually bring his typewriter over and just sit there and be like do 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 do, or like ding 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 ding, I guess. Or this could be a little bit more tongue in cheek, just kind of poking fun at something that this love interest has a very strong stance about. He has a very strong stance on typewriters. That was very publicly documented. This suggests a few things. So as we know, a typewriter is not practical to like take around with you. Even Matty mentioned that in the GQ interview. So the fact that he took something like that there, either literally or metaphorically, shows us that he was spending a lot of time at her apartment. He wasn't there for a quick visit. The typewriter was from the Tortured Poets department, which means that he metaphorically either bought or rented this typewriter from the Tortured Poets department, which tells us that what he was typing on the typewriter were the words of a tortured poet. That typewriter's purpose was to produce the work of a tortured poet. So this is saying that the love interest here is a member of the Tortured Poets department. He is a tortured poet in this scenario. Does this mean that our protagonist is not a tortured poet? Not necessarily. However, I do feel like there is a difference between our protagonist and our love interest here, because it says, I think, some things I never say, like who uses typewriters anyway. This shows us that our protagonist may think that the love interest using a typewriter is being like a little bit dramatic, right? Like who uses typewriters anyway? You don't have to use a typewriter to be able to produce a certain type of work. Our love interest here has tortured thoughts. The words he's typing on that typewriter are the thoughts and the words of a tortured man. This brings me back to a question that I posed in one of my earlier analyses of this album before its release. Can a tortured poet, can a tortured artist love someone? Are they capable of love? Do they have the ability to love? Can they love someone who is not a tortured poet themselves? Is there too much of a disconnect between their viewpoint of the world and their ability to exist in the world in a comfortable way? Listen, when I personally think about a tortured artist or a tortured poet, I think about someone who is very existential. And I am like an existential person, meaning I view lots of things in an existential way, and I always have. That's just been my viewpoint. I wouldn't define myself as like a tortured artist or a tortured poet, but I think some people really just are consistently caught up in emotions that are just like this and that are very dramatic. And not to say they're not valid, they are, but it's like sticky. They're stuck to those emotions and those thought processes. They can't unglue themselves from it. I view those thoughts and emotions as kind of like a sticky, swampy sort of thing, where if this tortured poet tries to break free from it, they can't. It's very, very difficult. And that's just not who they are, but it's a place where they can go to very easily. And it's a place that they can stay in very easily. In my mind, it's not like quicksand where it'll just take you in. It's more of like a sticky swamp where you can get out of it. It's just very difficult. I know that's like really random, but that's just how I view this. Like it's how I would imagine like a tortured poet or tortured artist in like a metaphorical way, using like imagery. And the trope of a tortured artist is usually intertwined with a conversation about mental health. Lots of very prolific artists had mental health struggles. I did touch upon this in my previous video. I'm not going to comment on any specific person's mental health in this video. I don't think that's appropriate for me to do. I'm just talking about the connotation of a tortured poet or a tortured artist for me. I'm not saying also that like a tortured person can't love. Of course they can, but I think it would take a specific type of person to be compatible with them. To clarify a little further here, when I am describing how I think about a tortured artist, I want to distinguish this from someone who is just suffering from, mental health struggles. What I'm saying, it may sound like someone that just has depression, but for me, the deciding factor as to whether it's like a tortured artist is that all of these emotions are very intricately entwined with their artistic expression, with their creativity, and with their creative output. The tortured artist may have depression, they may not as well, but all of these thoughts and emotions have a very strong correlation with the art that they're creating and with their creative capabilities. So I just wanted to point that out. As I'm editing this, I'm like, girl, you're literally just describing someone who maybe has depression. But the distinctive factor here is that it's entwined with their art. So yeah. Okay. On with the video. If we are to think about a metaphor that Taylor has used, sunshine versus midnight rain, a tortured poet is like a midnight storm, like a midnight hurricane. And listen, I think tortured artists and tortured poets, they can be attractive because it's like complicated and you want to figure them out and it's mysterious and it's passionate. It's like black dog energy. Like not black cat, but like a black dog energy. I don't know if that's a thing, but that's how I feel like it is. It's not golden retriever energy, which is like sunshine energy in my opinion. It can be interesting and like cool and you're like, "Oh my gosh, like they're just thinking about so many cool intangible things and like they understand things, but they have so many questions and it's just philosophers and it's just like those vibes. They're like wearing a metaphorical leather jacket at all times. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's super chill, but I don't think that someone who is like a tortured poet is necessarily compatible with every single type of person, especially if they have mental health struggles. And I'm not talking about a specific person right now. I am extrapolating this out. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I feel like there is a distinction between our protagonist and the love interest here. He's in his tortured poet vibes, and our protagonist is saying, like, who uses typewriters anyway? Which suggests that she might understand where he's coming from about this whole typewriter or tortured poet thing, but she's also not in the same place that he's in. Sometimes people can connect if they're on the same level or in the same mental and emotional space, but people grow and people change and they may not be in the same space any longer. So it'll be harder to have like a relationship with them because they won't be as compatible anymore. When it says who uses typewriters anyway, I think that's more of an internal thought our protagonist is having. I don't know if she's necessarily saying it out loud, but in her mind, she's like, okay, dude, like stop being dramatic. Like who even uses typewriters? Like calm down. Let me know if you interpret that in a different way or not. Then it says you're in self-sabotage mode, throwing spikes down on the road. So he's in his emo vibes right now, right? He is in a state of emotional unrest. He is sabotaging himself, right? Throwing spikes down on the road, that's very interesting. So the road brings forth a transportation metaphor, in my opinion. Roads suggest a journey, and you can go any direction you want. You can be traveling on foot, you can be traveling by a car, or even like a motorcycle if you want, I guess, or like a moped if you're in the Lizzie McGuire movie. I'm trying to bring back my Hilary Duff references. So we have the transportation metaphor of a road, and this love interest is throwing spikes on the road. Spikes are like the pointy things that can blow out your tires. So he is the one that's responsible for slowing down his progression. He is the one that's getting in his own way to go down a path, to go down a road. There's no one else throwing spikes here are blowing out his tires. It's him. He is the source of his own misfortune in this context. So he is in like a tortured state of existence right now. This to me suggests that the love interest is in an unstable emotional state. But I've seen this episode and still loved this show. I think I've seen this film before. This reminds me of the song Exile. I think I've seen this film before. And it also reminds me of the song The One. You know, the greatest films of all time were never made. I think a lot of people have noticed this, and I've definitely noticed this myself. A lot of songs on Folklore and Evermore can be interpreted in a semi-autobiographical way now that we have a little bit of context about Taylor and Matty. And by context, I mean like very loosely based lore, but I don't know, you guys. I've been thinking a lot about Folklore and Evermore and songs like Tolerate It, songs like The One, songs like Exile, songs like Willow. Tell me if you have thoughts about that. I know she said that those are not autobiographical. IDK. IDK. So our protagonist is not surprised that the love interest here is in self-sabotage mode. She has seen this, she has witnessed this, and she's fine with it. She's vibing with the instability. She can tolerate this amount of chaos. This also shows us that she's known him for a while. This doesn't deter her. This is something that she finds is still acceptable. To some people, this may be a red flag, but red flags are often subjective and people can tolerate different things. Who else decodes you? The word decode is interesting. Most importantly, Decode is a song by Paramore from the Twilight soundtrack. That's just really important to know as a human on this planet. So if you didn't know that, I'm telling you, you're welcome. Decode is also a word that has a very specific connotation. To me, it connotes analysis, but analysis with great precision. You're decoding something, you're studying something. So the protagonist has the ability to understand and get through the BS of this love interest emotional and mental state. She has the ability to understand him and to cut through everything. She's saying, who else decodes you? Meaning that she has the ability to do something that a lot of other people may not be able to do. A lot of other people may not be able to tolerate the self-sabotage mode that this love interest is in, but she can, and she kind of likes it. It sounds like she has a strong connection with him. And when I look at the lyrics about who we can interpret to be Taylor and Matty, I get some twin flame vibes from time to time. We can explore that in another video if we want. Let me know if you guys have an opinion about that. So this first verse gives us some context. We know that the tortured poet in this scenario is a love interest, and we know that he is in self-sabotage mode. This also may suggest that he's in a mode of creation, like when some artists are in like a slump emotionally, it could be the height of their creativity. We also know that our love interest is aware of this emotional state. She's seen it before, so there's probably history here, and she's like chill with it because she understands him. I don't know how well he understands her, but she understands him. I don't know how equal this dynamic is, but we'll see. Chorus. Who's gonna hold you like me? Who's gonna know you if not me? There is intimacy here. There is history here. Who's gonna hold you like me? Who's gonna know you like me? The first lyric here shows us physical intimacy. The second lyric here shows us more of an emotional sort of intimacy. Who's gonna know you? Who's gonna understand you? Who's gonna hold your emotions, your secrets, and your desires with love and care? The protagonist will, of course. For her, she's the one for him. From her perspective, she understands him. She can tolerate the ups and downs, and she seems to enjoy it. Maybe she sees the struggle he goes through to get to a place where he can create art that she finds beautiful. I don't know if he feels similarly about her, but we don't have his perspective here. We have her perspective. And when you believe that about someone, when you believe that you're truly the one who understands them the best and who is able to, be with them in a way that's very special and important, you're going to hold on to that relationship. You're not going to give it up that easily. And if it breaks down, it's going to be harder to get over. I really do wonder, and I am extrapolating this out from Taylor and Matty, I really do wonder in these sorts of dynamics if the protagonist is feeling this way based on her own emotions solely, or if the love interest actions are supporting her emotions and her beliefs that she's the one for him and she's the best for him. He may be getting benefit by the fact that she seems emotionally invested and can tolerate this, but I don't know how beneficial this scenario is to our love interest. And I don't mean beneficial in a transactional way, but is she getting her needs met? Is she being treated in a dignified and respectful way? I laughed in your face and said, "You're not Dylan Thomas. I'm not Patti Smith. This ain't the Chelsea Hotel. We're modern idiots." This is a quote, so Taylor could have actually said this to our love interest, or maybe not. This could have been a joking, playful moment, or like a drunken moment. For some reason, I think about Maroon when I think about this dynamic. I don't know if I'm just being very random with that, but for some reason, I just now associate Maroon with this relationship dynamic. I don't know. Maroon is a very Tumblr song, in my opinion. And like, I don't think Joe Alwyn is Tumblr. I think Matty Healy is Tumblr. And I could be very off base with this. I haven't given it a lot of thought, but just based on my first initial thoughts, I just associate Maroon with this relationship. And that could change. Maroon is a shade of red. There's a lot of layers to Maroon. I still haven't done a video on it. I was going to, but I'm glad I didn't because there's more layers to be analyzed in relation to that. And I could 100% change my mind on what I just said, but I don't know. Let me know if you have thoughts about that. I would genuinely want to know. Let's go to our favorite reliable source, Wikipedia. Dylan Thomas and Patti Smith, they were both famous writers and poets. It states here that Dylan Thomas was a Welsh poet and writer whose works include the poems "Do Not Go Gentle into That Night" and "Death Shall Have No Dominion." Although Thomas wrote exclusively in the English language, he has been acknowledged as one of the most important Welsh poets of the 20th century. He is noted for his original rhythmic and ingenious use of words and imagery. His position as one of the great modern poets has been much discussed, and he remains popular with the public. Dylan Thomas did pass away in 1953. Patti Smith is an American singer, songwriter, poet, painter, and author whose 1975 debut album, Horses, made her an influential member of the New York City-based punk rock movement. Both Dylan Thomas and Patti Smith spent time at the Chelsea Hotel. The Hotel Chelsea, also called as the Chelsea Hotel, is a hotel in the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan in New York City. This hotel became a place where a lot of artists and a lot of writers spent time and stayed at. The Chelsea had a reputation as being a bohemian enclave. This hotel was built in the 1880s in Manhattan, New York, and it became a long-term residence for generations of singers, bohemians, and writers. Lots of famous writers lived in the Chelsea Hotel. Of those were Dylan Thomas and Patti Smith. Our protagonist here is saying that we're not Dylan Thomas and Patti Smith. We're not as important and prolific as they are. We're not staying at the Chelsea Hotel. We're just vibing here in my apartment. She's saying, don't take this so seriously. I feel like a tortured artist would take the art very seriously. And it's not to say it's not serious, because art is serious, especially if you're an artist. Your art is your life. So it is important, right? It's an extension of the self. It's an extension of your identity. Like, I understand that. But I think that there are different layers and different intensities to this. Some artists may be more entrapped within their art than others. And being entrapped within your art is different than being connected to your art or flowing with your art. It's being literally entrapped within it. Feelings of entrapment are not positive, in my opinion. She's saying we're modern idiots. In other words, don't take this so seriously. We're not them. We're not these prolific writers at the Chelsea Hotel. We're just vibing, okay? We're modern idiots. We're out here watching our TikToks, okay? We are not these poetic legends, right? Just chill. That's the vibe I'm getting from this. Just chill. Then it says, no body, no effing body, no body. Protagonist is answering her rhetorical questions at the beginning of the chorus, where she asked, who's gonna hold you like me? Who's gonna know you if not me? No one. That's who. She's answering her own rhetorical question. She is a mastermind. She knows everything. So she's allowed to do that. She is under the belief that she is the one that is meant to love him and hold him and understand him. Verse 2. Verse 2 says, you smoked, then ate 7 bars of chocolate. They were probably stoned. I wonder if this love interest is like a milk chocolate guy or a dark chocolate guy. For some reason, I feel like people in England like really stan milk chocolate. And I'm only saying that because of Zoella vlogs. In my previous analysis, I told you guys that everything I know about England is from Zoella. So if you actually know actual things, please tell me. But that's where I'm getting my information. And I am very comfortable with that source. So I'm not going to like look into actual legitimate sources. I just want to use Zoella as my source. As a professional analyzer of Taylor Swift lyrics, that is my professional choice. We declared Charlie Puth should be a bigger artist. There is specificity here, which I love. I always say specificity brings forth intimacy and relatability in song lyrics. When artists use specific details, it may not be exactly relatable to the listener, but I think it creates trust. It's more intimate emotionally. I just love it. I love specific lyrics. It makes everything seem more real. It's like you're reading someone's journal or diary entry, and it's just cute. For some reason, the more specific something is, the more universal it becomes because of the emotion that is encapsulated and packaged into that specificity. I love it so much. This lyric also became like kind of controversial. Like, I don't know why, but people had lots of opinions about this lyric. I don't care that much about this lyric other than what I just described. The specificity for me is really important, but this is just a conversation they had about Charlie Puth, and like, you know, go off Charlie Puth. I don't really listen to him that often, but I know that he's very, very talented and he can like hear things like pitches and like recognize them and play by ear, I think, which is very impressive. Go off, Charlie. So they were talking about music, both artists talking about music. Then it says, I scratch your head, you fall asleep like a tattooed golden retriever. I love the phrase tattooed golden retriever. I mentioned earlier that I get Black Dog vibes from this love interest, but to the protagonist, it's a tattooed golden retriever. Okay, vibes. She knows him better than me. So I scratch your head, you fall asleep. She takes care of him and she comforts him. I sincerely hope that she is getting her needs met as well and not just being like the caretaker in this relationship. In my analysis of So Long London, I talked about how that protagonist took on the emotional labor of that relationship, of that long-term relationship. Is this a pattern of behavior for our protagonist? If the protagonists are the same for those songs, which I'm interpreting them as being, then maybe. This is cute. I'm not the biggest fan of this relationship dynamic based on all the lyrics about it, but just the standalone lyric of like a tattooed golden retriever is cute. It's a little bit of a juxtaposition, right? There's juxtaposing, or shall I say opposing energies present. When we think about someone being tattooed, A lot of people may think that person's more like hardcore, maybe not as emotional. They're just like harder exterior, tough. Again, metaphorical leather jacket vibes. But a golden retriever is sunshine energy. It's softer, it's cuter, it's more friendly. Another thing I will say about the lyric before this, where he falls asleep, falling asleep in the presence of someone is being in a vulnerable state. So it suggests a feeling of being comfortable and feeling safe and feeling taken care of. But you awake with dread, pounding nails in your head. So it seems like she's able to pacify him in a way. She's able to make him fall asleep and into a vulnerable, perhaps peaceful state. But his own state of being is chaotically unbalanced right now. He awakens with dread. Typically, you would want to wake up feeling refreshed from your peaceful slumber. That does not seem to be the case for this love interest. He awakes with dread, which is a very negative emotion to awaken with. And it says pounding nails in your head. He is a tortured poet, and his tortured vibes are not cured by sleeping or napping. Then the protagonist says, I chose this cyclone with you. This cyclone, which is like a very big storm. A cyclone is pretty much the same thing as a hurricane. I looked this up because I was like, literally, what is the difference between a cyclone and a hurricane? And apparently they're the same thing. It just depends on which ocean it's being created in. So yeah, I didn't know that. But a cyclone is a very intense storm. It has lots of high winds, lots of rain. There can be flooding. Cyclones are not chill vibes, you guys. Cyclones can cause a lot of danger. So this cyclone I'm interpreting as causing lots of emotional wreckage, maybe mental health wreckage. For me, the cyclone is showcasing two things. It's telling us about the love interest's mental and emotional state. Internally, it's like an emotional cyclone. But this relationship is also a cyclone. To be with this tortured poet, the protagonist must walk into the cyclone with him. Even though she can pacify him for a few moments, scratching his head while he falls asleep, she can't pacify his existence because the essence of his soul in this moment is to be tortured. That's just who he is. For some people, being like a tortured poet or artist may be an era for them. It may be a phase, a period of their life. For some people, it's their whole life. Right? And it can ebb and flow in intensity, but the protagonist has to go into the chaos, into this storm with him. So the cyclone is the love interest internal world, but it's also the relationship. The relationship is a cyclone because of him. He is the one that's setting the tone of the relationship. His vibes, his emotional state will always overpower the protagonist. I don't know, you guys. I feel like in these dynamics, whoever's in the role of the protagonist is in danger of having their identity like washed away and their shine dulled. You know, when you're in darkness, your eyes adjust to that darkness and it becomes normal for you. And just because darkness becomes normal for you doesn't mean that you should stay in the darkness. It's better to be in light imagery, right? Just because you can withstand the wind gusts of the cyclone doesn't mean you should stay in the cyclone. You can just be where there is a very cool and refreshing breeze instead. Your hair also won't get that messed up. That's the most important thing. And we have repetition of the chorus. The last line of the chorus is a little different. Instead of saying, and who's going to hold you like me, it says, and who's going to troll you like me, which suggests that they have a playful sort of relationship dynamic. Then we have the bridge. Sometimes I wonder if you're going to screw this up with me, but you told Lucy you'd kill me if I ever leave. When I was reacting to this, I was like, who is Lucy? And one of you guys commented, probably Lucy Dacus. And I was like, that tracks because Lucy Dacus, part of Boy Genius with Julian Baker and Phoebe Bridgers, they were on tour with Taylor for the Eras tour. And Matty was hanging out with Taylor at the same time that they were opening for Taylor. So like they were, vibing in the same place. One could assume they were having conversations and dialogue with one another. That's who I also think is being referred to here. That's what makes sense. But again, we don't know. This could not be autobiographical. This could be a random person. IDK. So the protagonist does have moments of doubt, even though she knows that she's the one for him. She chose a cyclone. She has seen this film before and she likes the ending. She does. It's interesting that she wonders if he's gonna screw it up with her. Not if she's gonna screw anything up. The fact that our protagonist is wondering this suggests that there could be a little crack in her sureness about this relationship. But you told Lucy you'd if I ever leave. To me, that's like a red flag when someone says that they would kill themselves if you're not with them. And this could have been more like a joke, right? It maybe wasn't as like intense as some people may interpret, but still, I think some jokes are even a red flag, honestly. Let me know if you have an opinion about this. I don't know, you guys. That seems pretty intense to me. But again, red flags are subjective. This suggests that he really was into the love interest, but again, I feel like someone who is a chronically intense tortured artist, their ability to love is different. Their love that they express to you is different. And you can say this about any type of person. I'm not out here trying to like shade tortured artists and tortured poets. Each person, depending on their personality and their life, will express and show their love in a different way and will have different thresholds of love that they can show and experience. But in this dynamic, there's just a lot of instability that I associate with the love interest here. And since there is so much instability and since there is a cyclone associated with the love interest, the fact that he's saying things like this to me is a little bit concerning. It's elevated passion that's very unstable. I always say this about passion. I think passion is wonderful. I think it's a very beautiful thing. I think it's fun. And I think it's necessary to have dashes of passion in your life and in your relationships. But I think that stability should exist first, and then passion should be built upon that stability. If it's just straight up passion, it's not balanced, it's faulty, and it can become very reckless and very dangerous, literally, like in Lana Del Rey songs, or more metaphorically in an emotional way, which is how I would interpret that here. Then it says, and I had said that to Jack about you, so I felt seen. This is Jack Antonoff. I'm like 99.9% sure, but I could also be wrong. This could be a made up person named Jack. So our protagonist said the same thing that she would if he left her. So like twin flame vibes, they match in that regard. There is a very twin flamey sort of vibe with this relationship where it's like kind of chaotic and really passionate and they've been in each other's lives for a really long time. There's like flames associated with this. It's fast. It's like live fast, live hard, leather jacket, tortured artist, cyclone, but I love the cyclone. It's a lot of passion and a lot of chaos. For our protagonist, there seems to be a lot of depth in the connection, which gives me twin flame vibes. Some people believe that you should end up with your twin flame. Some people believe that you should end up with your soulmate. Your soulmate is a calmer love. It's like a fireplace. It keeps you warm. It's like a campfire, right? It keeps you safe. But a twin flame, I feel like that flame can run out quickly. It can get relit, but it's like more chaotic. It's like a match that you can blow out. Maybe it's like a firework. I've heard that metaphor before. I'm interested to know if you have an opinion about this. Are you meant to end up with your twin flame, or are they just meant to be a lesson for you on like your karmic journey or whatever? Or are you meant to end up with your soulmate? Also, do you only have one twin flame, or can you have multiple? And do you only have one soulmate, or can you have multiple? I'm just wondering your guys' opinion about that. I don't think that's super relevant to this song. Then it says, everyone we know understands why it's meant to be. They know something that I don't. They know something that I don't. Not to judge, because I literally don't know anything about these people. They're public figures, but like we literally don't know them, guys. We don't know them. But yeah, like when you know, you know. To quote Lana Del Rey, when you know, you know. Everyone they know knows the actual lore and they know the actual context. Then it says, cause we're crazy. So much unbalance is present within that. And that's why I feel like this may be a faded karmic sort of vibe. And if our protagonist views it in this way, it's going to make her stay longer. And I've talked about this so much when I've been talking about the Tortured Poets Department album. If you think that something is faded, you're going to add more value to it and you're going to hold on longer to it. The protagonist is aware that they're both crazy and maybe their crazies like work together and they complement each other. You know, everyone is crazy in their own way. Perhaps our protagonist and his love interest are able to withstand similar types of chaos and they kind of like it. Maybe they're both midnight rain. Our protagonist is midnight rain. And to me, this love interest is like a midnight cyclone. So yeah, vibes. So tell me who else is going to know me. Okay, so at least like this suggests that he really understands her and he knows her, which is nice. I'm glad that there's some reciprocation going on here. Then it says, at dinner, you take my ring off my middle finger and put it on the one people put wedding rings on. Just like when they were wearing imaginary rings on those swings. If he actually did this, and then he ended up ghosting her, I'm not even going to say anything. And that's the closest I've ever come to my heart exploding. So her heart here is exploding due to excitement, due to a burst of feeling love and having a feeling of commitment in a romantic context. Your heart exploding is also something that is unbalanced and passionate. That's one way you can interpret it. But I would assume that like, you know, anyone talking about marriage who is interested in marriage would have a very like heightened feeling. I think that's normal, but it's just sad that this is the only time our protagonist had this heightened emotional feeling, when it was just the thought, the suggestion of marriage. She never had an actual marriage engagement happen from this relationship, as far as we know, right? I'm not talking about specific people at this instance. We're just extrapolating it out. One could assume that this was moving really fast because they were talking about marriage. And if we want to think about this as about Taylor and Matty, then this was simply like a 3-month long relationship or entanglement, whatever you want to call it. If there really was vibes for about a decade before, then it does change the narrative a little bit. But again, the sense that I get from this love interest is that they're pretty like unstable and unbalanced, and they could be reckless. I don't know. Logically, from an outside perspective, I wouldn't trust anyone in that state if they were ever talking about a long-term commitment like marriage, but I don't know the dynamics of this relationship, and our love interest seems to be all about the chaotic vibes. She says that she's crazy too, but this shows us that this situation, this dynamic was serious. The love interest was suggesting marriage, and the protagonist was super stoked about it. They were in love, it seems, but it was a chaotic, unstable love. Now, I'm going to pose this question: can love be chaotic and unstable? If a love is those things, is it actually love or is it something different? I do believe that different types of love can exist, but this is a love that to me just seems very chaotic. But again, like it seemed to work for the protagonist. Like she was all about the cyclone and she was vibing with it. She could withstand those wind gusts. She could report live from the scene. We have the chorus again. It's repetition of lyrics, but some differences do exist. So it says, "Who's gonna hold you?" And the protagonist is answering. She says it's her. Me. Who's gonna know you? Me. She is very sure about this. She's getting a little territorial. She is very passionate about the fact that she's the person that can love the love interest the best, and she's the person that really understands him. She understands the highs and the lows, and she's willing to be there for the chaotic lows. She's willing to be there when he's in self-sabotage mode and eating like lots and lots and lots of chocolate. I wonder what brand of chocolate it is. I just like want a recommendation for chocolate, I guess. IDK. And then we have repetition of the lyrics, and you're not Dylan Thomas, I'm not Patti Smith, this ain't the Chelsea Hotel. But then it says we're two idiots. They're not modern idiots anymore. I guess it's like vintage vibes now. That's a little bit of a difference, but what remains the same is that the protagonist is saying we're two idiots. They're two idiots in love. They're two idiots in love, maybe. They're both crazy. You guys, this is just straight chaos. It's straight chaos. And the protagonist has awareness that it's chaos, but she's vibing with it and she's like chill with it. And then she says, "Who's gonna hold you?" Verse, there's repetition of "who's gonna hold you." That's repeated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, including background vocals. Then it says, "gonna know you, gonna troll you." And again, trolling is like that playful sort of intimacy. The fact that the protagonist is repeatedly asking these questions makes me think that there are vibes within the dynamic that suggest that the love interest could be thinking about another person holding him and knowing him and things like that, or there is like a threat to the relationship. Because if you're secure in that, you wouldn't really be thinking like, oh, who's going to do this if it wasn't me, right? The protagonist may be worried that there is something on the horizon in regards to this relationship. It's not on stable ground. I would argue it was never on stable ground because of the dynamics here, but our protagonist may seem worried. And I always tell you guys in my analyses that repetition signifies significance. When certain words or phrases are repeated, I do view that as very important, especially when it's not the song title, and especially when we have very intentional songwriters, which is how I perceive and interpret Taylor Swift. Who's Gonna Hold You is not the song title, right? So the fact that this is repeated to me is significant. She is ruminating on this thought. There must be a reason for the rumination. There are cracks that are beginning to form and show within this dynamic. Maybe a chaotic relationship, maybe a relationship that can be represented by a match burning instead of a fireplace burning won't last the test of time. Then we have the outro, which consists of repeated lyrics. It says, "You left your typewriter at my apartment, straight from the tortured poet's department. Who else decodes you?" The question here, who else decodes you, is repeated. Who else decodes you is very important in my opinion. She's saying, who else is decoding you? Whose perfume is that on your collar? Whose lipstick is that on your collar? It's not mine. I think she's like, who else is decoding you right now? Who else is giving you an emotional landing place? Who else is understanding you? Who are you having conversations with? I think that this love interest may be becoming emotionally involved with another person. That's one way you can interpret it. It's kind of like an accusation a little bit. Or this could not be that. This could be more of an internal monologue of the protagonist, like we were talking about before. I do like that it's kind of like a full circle moment. I always say that I enjoy it when Taylor ends the song the way that she begins it, with similar lyrics. But the who else decodes you to me is a little bit foreboding. The tone of that I perceive to be like a foreshadow. Like, who else is decoding you? I sense that there's something off balance here, especially because the verse prior to this is repetition of who's going to hold you. Those are ruminating thoughts of someone who is realizing there is a shift in the dynamic and that there may be a breakdown of the relationship on the horizon. So the tortured poets department here is strictly associated with the love interest, not with a protagonist. Love interest's character, his personhood, is defined as being a member of the tortured poets department. His identity is that of a tortured poet. That is the best, most cohesive way to describe him as a human being. It describes the contents of his character, of his soul, and of his overall vibe. All in all, this song is describing a very chaotic dynamic, one that the protagonist is aware is chaotic and that she's all about, which suggests that maybe she has a high chaotic tolerance. Maybe her life is chaotic in its own way. The relationship may be one-sided, but we only have the perspective of the love interest. It's a very passion-fueled, artsy sort of love story, and it is giving me some twin flame energy. I would love to know your take about this. I think this song is just an interesting peek into the dynamic. And again, we can always extrapolate this out to not be about specific people. We don't know how autobiographical this album is, but I would love to know your thoughts. Please share it with me down below in the comments. I always enjoy reading your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. My consulting services are linked down below if you're interested, and I will see you next time. Bye!